Right, so you're back. And today we are diving into a world that I know a lot of you out there listening are really, really into. We're talking Brazilian music,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically samba and bossa nova.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, these are genres that just have this incredible life and energy to them, right? And I think for a lot of people, it's that surface level, that initial kind of gut reaction to the music
Yeah.
that grabs you. But what we want to do today is go deeper.
Yeah.
And we have two sources here. One of them kind of hints at this like deep analysis,
Right.
for musicians. And another one that really kind of poses the fundamental question, bossa nova or samba?
Right.
So the mission for us today is to really kind of unpack those intricacies.
Yeah.
What are the technical elements, the
Right.
things that we as musicians can really get our heads around and maybe even apply to our own playing, our own compositions?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, right off the bat, you see samba and bossa nova together a lot of times, right? So it's like this and relationship, but then you see bossa nova or samba.
Yeah.
It kind of makes you wonder, is it and or is it or? What are we really dealing with
Yeah.
here?
Are we talking about siblings or distant cousins?
Exactly.
Like how close are these things really?
Yeah, so let's start with something that I think is really fundamental, especially when you talk about Brazilian music,
Yeah.
and that's rhythm.
Yeah, for sure.
So, when you think about samba, this
Yeah.
bacteria is exploding with these polyrhythms.
Right.
That surdo, just, hitting you in the chest like a heartbeat.
Yeah, that pulse.
Syncopation that just makes you want to move. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
But then when you get to bossa nova, what's going on rhythmically there for us as musicians? Like, what are we hearing?
Yeah, that's a really key distinction, I think, between the two. So, if you think about bossa nova, a lot of times it's centered around this rhythmic cell that's been made famous by people like João Gilberto.
Right.
And it's much more understated, it's intricate.
Yeah.
It's almost got like a clavey-like feel
Yeah.
on the guitar, and the bass drum is often hitting on the and of two. And then you've got like a snare or a rim shot coming in as a syncopated counterpoint.
Oh, wow.
But it's not about these dense layers of percussion, it's much more like this nuanced, often guitar-led, rhythmic foundation.
Like a different kind of groove.
It is, yeah. And I think that actually, because the rhythm is so much more subtle, it allows for the harmonic complexity of bossa nova to really come to the forefront.
Oh, that makes sense.
Whereas in samba, the rhythm is this kind of dominant driving force.
Right. And speaking of harmony, that's another thing that's always really stood out to me about bossa nova especially. Those lush chords, those extended harmonies, it almost has like a jazz feel to it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So for us as musicians,
Yeah.
what's really going on harmonically in bossa nova? What are those building blocks?
Yeah, I mean, this is where bossa nova gets really, really sophisticated. It embraced jazz harmony, So you're hearing these extended chords, 7th, 9th, 13th, and they're voiced in these very specific and beautiful ways, and that's what creates this really lush and complex sound. And it also provides, a really wide palette for melodic improvisation and arrangement.
Right.
And samba, while it's harmonically rich in its own right, tends to rely more on these cyclical chord progressions,
Mm-hmm.
And it's the cavaquinho and sometimes the banjo that are providing a lot of that rhythmic and harmonic energy.
And it's almost like the cavaquinho is dictating the harmonic rhythm in a lot of those samba tunes.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's driving it forward.
So now when we think about melody, right, we've talked about rhythm, we've talked about harmony. Do those differences impact the way melodies are constructed in samba versus bossa nova?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in samba, a lot of times the melody is very strongly connected to the underlying pulse and the syncopation.
Wow.
They're often very lyrical and they're really designed to be danced to. Whereas in bossa nova, the melodies can be more conversational. They're often using wider intervals and the phrasing sometimes feels like it's kind of floating above
Interesting.
the intricate rhythmic and harmonic accompaniment.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
It creates this sense of like elegant detachment almost.
Oh, I like that. Elegant detachment. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you can't talk about these genres without talking about the instrumentation,
Yeah.
because they both have such distinct sonic signatures, right?
Yeah.
So for samba, what are some of those key instruments that really define that sound?
Well, I mean, it's percussive heavy,
Yeah.
so you've got the various drums of the bateria,
Right.
the pandero with all of its intricate hand patterns,
Okay.
the agogo, that sharp attack, and then you've got the cavaquinho and sometimes the banjo providing this like crucial rhythmic and harmonic energy.
That's such a driving sound.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And then in contrast, Bossa Nova, it's typically featuring the nylon string guitar as its core. And the percussion is much more delicate. So it might be like brushes on a snare drum or a very softly played surdo.
Okay.
So the overall texture is much more intimate and sparse.
Makes sense.
Which allows, the nuances of the guitar and the vocals to really kind of shine through.
Yeah, and then, thinking about those nuances, it's like when we listen to these genres, they both have such a distinct Brazilian feel to them. But is there a difference in the overall emotional kind of mood that they evoke?
I think there is. I mean, if you connect it back to some of these technical elements, samba with those driving rhythms and those large ensembles,
Oh, yeah.
a lot of times you're getting this feeling of joy, community, this vibrant celebration.
Absolutely.
But then with bossa nova, with the more subtle dynamics and those really sophisticated harmonies and those often slower tempos,
Right.
it often evokes the sense of saudade,
I love that word.
which is this uniquely Portuguese, feeling of longing,
Yeah.
but also intimacy and a certain kind of understated beauty.
It's almost melancholic in a way, right?
It is, yeah. It's very introspective.
Yeah, so it really seems like it's not about choosing one or the other.
No,
They each offer something really unique, right?
they really do. I mean, it's fascinating how both of these traditions, they're both deeply rooted in Brazilian culture,
Yeah.
but they've evolved these very distinct and unique technical characteristics.
Right.
And they really offer these diverse avenues, for musical expression and appreciation for us as performers and composers.
For sure. So to everyone listening out there, especially if you're a musician who's drawn to Brazilian music, we've touched on a lot today. We've talked about that rhythmic drive of samba versus the subtle pulse of bossa nova, the jazz-infused harmonies of bossa nova, those cyclical progressions in samba, melodic phrasing, the instrumentation, even the emotional landscapes that they evoke. So thinking about all of these differences, these technical differences, what aspects of each genre really speak to you the most? Yeah, as a musician, what resonates with your own sensibilities and why? I think that's a great question to kind of sit with and, listen a little more analytically to these genres.
Yeah, and I think this deeper understanding, it not only enhances your appreciation, but it also opens up all these exciting possibilities,
For sure.
For your own musical exploration within this vast and beautiful world of Brazilian music.
It's a deep well.
It is.
So thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep listening deeply.